Media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How's that? All right, y'all. Welcome to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where masculinity has not been recalled and faith has not been neutered. Today is Thursday, February 19th, the year of our Lord 2026. And this is not just politics. It is spiritual warfare and suicidal empathy dressed up as progress. And we're going to get into some of the spiritual warfare stuff here in a little bit. But we are done pretending, we're done pulling punches, and we are never going to apologize. This is not a safe space. This is a truth bomb impact zone, and we are getting after it. So we're watching something dangerous unfold in real time, if you're paying attention. It's not political division. It's not just cultural shift. We're watching a nation go to war with reality itself. Biology is now negotiable. Life is a lot more bureaucratic. Rights are conditional. And truth is inconvenient at best. And when a society puts reality in the crosshairs, it should not be a surprise when the consequences hit the target. So something that I touched on it in the last show, and I'm going to get into it a little deeper here. I'm going to talk about the shooting in Rhode Island by the so-called trans person, the gender diluted individual. Every time that there's a shooting, regardless of who ends up being the perpetrator, we're told to wait for the facts. And those of us who are sensible, those of us who understand how these things work, we do exactly that. But the left, whenever the shooter doesn't fit the narrative, well, then they either completely block it out, like you hear about the initial report, and then you don't hear anything about it. But when the shooter fits the narrative, well, then it is plastered all over every news station 24/7, and they get everything they possibly can out of that news cycle. Because they're not really journalists. They're not really journalists. They're propagandists, and their truth, to the extent that that even really exists, I hate using that term, but their truth changes depending on who is pulling the trigger. In Pawtucket, Rhode Island, not too far from where I grew up and lived for a long time, there was a gender-deluded individual who targeted his family, shot his ex-wife and his adult son, injured 3 more. I believe they were also family members. And then he took his own life. Tragedy by all measures. I mean, there's no making light of it. It's a tragedy. It should not have happened. There was, I don't want to say a silver lining, but there was a hero who intervened and prevented more tragedy. And I want to just highlight him real quick because this guy was a hero. This guy was, without a doubt, mission ready. So let's take a look at his story real quick.
You were injured in this heroic situation where you stopped this person from taking more innocent lives. Can you show us your hand and your stitches, and then tell us about the moment that you decided to step in here and save people?
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. So you explained it right. You set it up. We were at the event, family event. Felt I heard 2 balloons, kind of peeked around. Heard a third pop, but there was no balloon in front of me. When I looked forward and around, I saw a gun being pointed at the family that was sitting in the second row. And the first thing that I said, my wife was sitting next to me with some friends. I said, "Run, run." And she started running, and if you see the video, I kind of waited about 1 second because I was kind of waiting for a spot. And then as soon as it kind of got clear, the shooter was leaning over, and I kind of jumped on that 4th railing and jumped down. And as I jumped, I was reaching for the gun. My focus was the gun. So I put the hand on the gun and put my other hand and tried to land on top of his body. And as the process, he was shooting. And one of the shells, as I was jumping, hit me in the face. And then my hand got caught in the gun.
Do you have any training to handle a situation like this, or was this just your pure instinct to stop this horrific situation where people were being killed?
No, ma'am. No official training whatsoever.
Nope, no training. Just a guy doing what he is supposed to do, protect. And that is one of the good things that came out of this, insofar as that there are men willing to do what men are supposed to do, and that is a good thing. But I want to get back to the actual transformer, as someone in chat put it. It's not funny. This is not a funny story, but that was slightly amusing. There were warning signs. There were a ton of warning signs from this guy. And there are almost always a ton of warning signs when it comes to these situations. And come to find out, this guy was all over social media. He responded to tweets from Kevin Sorbo and some other well-known individuals. He defended Timmy McBride, representative from Delaware. Let's take a look at a couple of these, because it's worth noting. It's worth noting that the warning signs were evident. I know it's kind of hard to see, but this is Kevin Sorbo talking about Timmy McBride. And the shooter replied to him and said, "Keep bashing us, but do not wonder why we go berserk." The pattern is there. It happens all the time. And there were a couple of other, I'm not going to get into all of them at this point. There were a couple of other tweets from this guy saying the same thing, saying that he was going to go berserk. It's no wonder why these deluded individuals do what they do. So he's obviously unstable. He divorced his wife, or his wife divorced him, because he went through gender mutilation surgery, and that was obviously not what she signed up for. And his daughter, on the way out of the police station, said that he had been mentally unstable. The warning signs are always there. They're always there. But something else that's always there is the media double standard. When the identity fits a favored or a disfavored category, there is immediate emphasis on that. And I'm talking about straight white males. Whenever one of these tragedies is committed by somebody in that demographic, they will not stop talking about it. And then they'll get into, or try to get into, the broader societal commentary about how straight white men are a threat to the society, as Donna Lemonade once put it, and how a lot of people put it that way. A lot of so-called journalists put it that way. But when the identity of the person falls in a protected category, as in Transformers, the language is softer. There's always some hesitation. They don't want to stigmatize. But at the same time, those stories fall out of the news cycle quick. I mean, except for Katie Pavlich, the story where she interviewed the hero in that story, there's not a lot going on. There's not a lot of stories being written about it. There's not a lot of coverage in the American Pravda about it. And even in some conservative publications and whatnot, there's not a lot of coverage on it, which is disappointing. There's a lot of coverage about Nancy Guthrie, and that's also a tragedy. I'm not trying to minimize that, but it was pointed out to me that a child went missing the same day in the same county, and the family was visited once by authorities. So make of that what you will. But you can't have two standards of relevance. Either the identity of the person is relevant in the reporting or it isn't. And it doesn't get to depend on who you're protecting. And you know that they're protecting the so-called trans community, the gender deluded community. And they also try to minimize the idea of of the mass shooting. They play with the definitions of mass shootings, and if the FBI has their definition of a mass shooting, and if only 2 people are shot or killed, then it doesn't qualify, which I think is a bit of a mistake. But the mass shootings that have taken place in recent years by these gender-deluded individuals should be taken into account, and it is taken into account in our circles, in conservative circles. We know it, we understand it, and we know something has to be done about it. But you see these leftists, they will talk about how most mass shootings are committed by straight white males, and that the number of mass shootings committed by trans people is statistically insignificant. And taken as a whole since they've been tabulating mass shootings, maybe. But when you look at what's going on in the past 10 years, that is a pattern worth noting. And to dismiss it does everyone a disservice. There is a very real issue when it comes to these mass shootings, and I want to show you this, and then we'll get into it a little more.
And that is the trans shooters. They keep making these headlines. We just saw it this week in Rhode Island, where a trans shot up a high school hockey game. What's making them so trigger happy, Callie? And is RFK Jr. looking into it? Is it the SSRIs, the psychotropic drugs? What are trans people taking and ingesting into their body with hormones and testosterone? Could this be making them more violent? Because we can't ignore these numbers.
Rachel, the moment President Trump swore in Secretary Kennedy, he said, "I want you to address the over-medicalization crisis among teens." I just pulled some statistics from HHS. 30% of teens in the United States are on a daily medication. Teen antidepressants, a psychoactive drug, has gone up 14,000% since 1987. Antipsychotic medications among kids up 800% since 1995. And stimulant prescriptions, it's Adderall, 1 molecule away from crystal meth, a very powerful drug. It's up 250% those prescriptions since 1995. We are poisoning our kids with ultra-processed food, and then we are drugging them at rates unseen in human history. And to think that this does not have a link to other issues downstream of that would be crazy. And we're investigating it heavily, and we're taking action.
I mean, it should be obvious to anyone that is a huge problem. And then when you compound that with the gender-deluded people who are pumped full of all kinds of hormones and drugs and everything else, all kinds of medications, SSRIs, cross-sex hormones, just they're like he said, they're poisoning themselves. And these doctors are complicit in that. And there have been no studies that actually track what the effects of these drugs have long term. And this guy, he had gone through the gender mutilation surgery. And so he is on a regimen of all kinds of drugs, which according to the family, he was already unstable, and that just that didn't help matters. And somebody in the chat mentioned the fact that he had a Nazi tattoo. Okay, yeah, more evidence of his mental instability. I mean, the fact is people are dead, and there's no evidence that his alleged Nazi beliefs had anything to do with it. It was a family dispute based on the fact that he was a lunatic. The common thread among all of this, all of these people, aside from the fact that they are gender diluted, is the mental instability and what type of drugs are contributing to it and making it worse. And then the fact is that our society has determined that affirming these people's delusions is the way to go. And I think we have ample evidence to suggest that that is wrong. Narratives in these instances always override reality. If we want fewer tragedies like this, we need to be honest. We need to be honest with these people, not edit our statements because of compassion or some such nonsense. There's no compassion in hiding the truth. There's no compassion in lying to people. And there's no healing in pretending that reality is negotiable, because it's not. And scripture warns us about calling good evil and evil good. These lines were drawn and they're clear. And when we blur them to protect the narrative, that's not loving. That's not compassionate. We're weakening the very foundation that keeps us stable, that keeps the society stable. We can care about individuals, we can be compassionate about them. These people are made in the image of God, and we need to be loving and honest with them and not edit the facts. Truth is not the enemy, deception is. And we know who the father of lies is, don't we? All right, I want to get to this story. I've talked about this before on the show, and I've talked about it a few times on the show. And I think I may have written about it once or twice, I'm not sure. I know I probably have a draft somewhere. But I'm talking about this. So let's take a look at this, and then we'll get into it. Parents demand reform after son euthanized at 26 under controversial law. I'm talking about MAID. And I know this is a Canadian law, but there's a reason why I'm bringing it up. And I'll get into that here in a second. But this is about a 26-year-old man who is not terminal, he wasn't dying, but yet he was approved for euthanasia. Blind in one eye, type 1 diabetic, suffered from seasonal depression. He needed treatment, but he was not terminally ill. And the man's name is Keanu Bafayan. He's 26, approved under what is called Track 2 in MAID, which means that there was no reasonable expectation that his condition would contribute to his death in any immediate way. So the Canadian government decided that he was, even though he had treatable conditions, they decided that he was irremediable. This is no longer about terminally ill people like it was supposed to be. And I remember the first time I heard about this was when they transitioned from terminally ill to people who were in chronic pain and stuff like that. And the first time I saw it, they were profiling a veteran who was in chronic pain, a Canadian veteran who was in chronic pain, couldn't really afford to take care of himself. And they decided that he was a good candidate for MAID. And it was all about how he wanted to do it because he was in so much pain and there were no other options for him. This is communicating that unless your life meets certain subjective standards, it's not worth living. And this is what happens in a single payer system. And this is what the American left wants. This is how they ration care without rationing it. And Illinois has already passed legislation that was modeled after Canada's MAID program, and California is doing the same thing. This was supposed to be an end of life, terminally ill, cancer, imminent death, which I still disagree with completely. But that's how this was introduced. Right now, one of the stories I talked about was a young woman whose family was trying to stop the Canadian government from killing her because she had some mental illness. And it's framed as this autonomy and compassion for these individuals. But this is what happens when, again, like I said, a single payer system, the government doesn't want to do anything to help. They just want to basically get rid of you. And so they broaden definitions. They broaden the scope. They lower the safeguards. And when they do that, over time, the resistance to these things decreases. The culture gets comfortable with it. The Overton window shifts. And what was once rare becomes normalized. Human worth is not tied to health. It's not tied to productivity. It's not tied to your independence. It's not tied to your emotional stability, your mental state. It's tied to being made in God's image. and that disability does not diminish God's image or the inherent dignity that comes with that. Depression doesn't do that. When the society defines life worth by functionality, by productivity, it has completely lost the plot, completely. And they try to tell us it's compassion, as I said, but Christian compassion is responsible for most of the great things in Western civilization. Let's be honest. Hospitals, education, charities, all of that is based on Christian principles. Christian compassion bears burdens. It helps the weak. It comforts the suffering. It invests in care of the individual, not murder, which is what this is. State-sanctioned murder. Whether we're talking about euthanasia or abortion. Because modern secular compassion basically says you don't have to bear that burden. You don't have to suffer. We can help you eliminate that. Killing the pain by killing the person is not mercy, it's murder. Period. End of story. And I mentioned abortion. It's the same playbook. Choice, autonomy. My body, my choice. Medicalized language to soften the moral decay, the moral gravity of the situation. When life becomes conditional through desire or circumstance, it becomes disposable. If it's unwanted, terminate it. If it's burdensome, get rid of it. If it's suffering, eliminate it. No mention of prayer or anything like that. No. But if choice is the standard, then life becomes expendable. And we have absolutely no business snuffing out a human life that God has brought into this world. And I know somebody's going to say something about killing in self-defense and all that. Completely different story that has no bearing on what we're talking about. But I know somebody's going to mention it. So just to get that out there. But what does this communicate to people who are disabled? What does this communicate to people who have chronic illnesses? To young adults who are already awash in hormones and mental issues compounded by all these drugs that we're pumping them full of? What does it communicate? It communicates that you're better off dead. It communicates that they're better off dead, that their families are better off dead, or that their families are better off with them dead. And I mentioned earlier the Overton window. These policies, Andrew Breitbart once famously said that politics is downstream from culture. And years ago, I wrote in a blog, I don't think it's not up on SHR, but I wrote that while that's true, policy also helps shape the culture. It's cyclical. And policies like this shape the culture. Policies like this make it acceptable for the state to come in and say, yeah, your life isn't worth living, so let's just go ahead and end it for you. And when we look at what our society has become, and we look at what it was like even 50 years ago, back when the church played a much more central role in society and governance, the culture was so much better off. The culture was so much better off. The church historically defended, as I mentioned before, the infirm, the elderly, the disabled, and cared for them because they recognized the dignity of human life and understood that it was their responsibility to care for those vulnerable people. Civilizations are judged by how they treat the weakest in their society. And if Jesus doesn't come before we have a chance to look back at this historically, we are going to look back and say, what were we thinking? Oh, hopefully we'll look back. Hopefully there'll be a course correction. We'll be able to look back and say, what were we thinking? I know that is kind of a far off thing right now because of the trajectory that we're on. But I pray that that's the case. But as I say all the time, this is not just a political debate. This is spiritual warfare. The state says that life doesn't mean much if it's not productive. And the church says, Christians say life is sacred because God says so. One produces care, palliative care, emergent care, and the other produces euthanasia. A culture that loses its reverence for life will always expand its reasons for ending it. Always. Just like when they declare emergencies and they use those emergencies as excuses to trample on your rights. As long as you're successful doing it, they will always come up with an emergency to trample on your rights. And they will always come up with a reason to end life if they don't think it's worth anything. All right, y'all. Let's get a word in from our sponsor. And our sponsor for today's show is Burning It Up Hat Company. And the hat that I'm wearing today was made by Burning It Up. So if you're gonna wear a cowboy hat, wear one that actually means something. And Burning It Up Hat Company built me this custom navy hat, and it fits like it was made for me because it was. Clean lines, sharp crown, sharp look, as far as I'm concerned. This isn't something that you just grab off the shelf. It's built by a woman who knows her craft. So if you want to stand out without saying a word, get your hat made at Burning It Up Hat Company. Burning It Up Hat Company, built right, worn proud. BurningItUp.com. Visit BurningItUp.com today. All right, y'all. I am Big E, and you are watching or listening to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where you can catch our great lineup, Sackhead Sean with the Edge of Liberty, every Monday and Wednesday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Jersey Joe, the Reaver of Common Sense, every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And BZ with the Berserk Bobcat Saloon, the bloviating Zeppelin himself, every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Please like and subscribe and share all of these shows. We have been in the midst of a tremendous push. We are up to 1,050 subscribers. We just hit 1,000 not that long ago, and we added 50 in a really short amount of time. So thank you all for that. We got the breakthrough that we were praying for, but now we're on to the next goal, which is 2,000 subscribers, because we want to reach as many people as we possibly can. All right, now back to the briefing. And I want to get into this because even though I don't live in these states, it means a lot to me. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Those 27 words mean a lot. And the left, they mean absolutely nothing to the left. And we're living in a post-Bruin time right now. The Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment and the history and tradition of the Second Amendment should guide all of any regulation with respect to firearms. Does the Second Amendment's plain text cover the conduct? If so, can the government show a historical tradition or similar regulation at the time of the founding? And if not, then it gets thrown out. There's no interest balancing. There's no, well, this is a good idea. It's history. And that's the lens through which the Supreme Court said we must look at any infringement on our rights. And a couple of states have some serious infringements cooking in their legislatures. New Mexico has SB 17. It is actually due to, there's a deadline for that, which is noon Mountain Time. So not too far from now, but noon Mountain Time on the 19th. And it's the people of New Mexico have stood up, and there is a chance that it could get defeated. But I want to talk about it because this is part of Governor Lou Jean Grisham's push to get rid of the Second Amendment. And I have written about her and her ridiculousness over the years. That has been one of her main goals as governor of New Mexico, is to get rid of law-abiding citizens owning guns. for some reason, she's a leftist. That's the reason. But anyway, SB 17 in New Mexico targets the sale of semi-automatic rifles, puts a ban on magazine capacity, limits 50 caliber rifles, and puts unbelievable regulatory burdens on licensed FFLs. Semi-automatic rifles are ubiquitous nationwide. It is the very definition of in common use. And under Heller, all arms in common lawful use are protected. So New Mexico is going to have to show a founding era analog for banning these categories. That is a steep hill to climb because it's been struck down many times already. But they keep doing it. They keep doing it. They want to limit magazines to under 10 rounds, which are also 10 magazines that have a capacity of more than 10 rounds are also ubiquitous nationwide. Different circuits have ruled differently on these things, but if this passes, if this goes through, litigation is guaranteed. Several gun groups are already have lawsuits drafted and ready to submit. Like as soon as it passes, they will file. But SB 17 also increases inspection and compliance requirements for gun dealers. They are going to have certain storage requirements. They are going to have certain security surveillance requirements. And most of these gun dealers, they're small businesses. These regulations are going to put most of them out of business, which is what they want. And this regulation becomes a de facto prohibition, because if the people can't afford to run the business, people won't be able to buy the product. If it passes, like I said, it's going to face litigation. But in the meantime, there's a very good chance, because I think New Mexico falls under the Fourth Circuit, which is notoriously hostile to Second Amendment cases. So getting an injunction, I mean, these laws are going to go into effect. If it passes, these laws are going to go into effect, at least temporarily. And by the time the Supreme Court were to get it, if they even take up the case, a lot of these businesses could be out of business. And the goal was accomplished. So we'll see what happens in a few hours in New Mexico. I'm praying that it gets defeated. But Virginia is a whole different animal. Virginia they have a stack of restrictions that they are putting forth at the same time. And it is, and this hits me personally because my parents live in Virginia. My parents are gun owners, and this could make them felons completely overnight. And that is a huge, huge problem. So there are some, I mean, like I said, there's a stack of bills. I'm not going to get into all of them, but they have assault weapons bans, public carry restrictions, under 21 purchase and possession bans, expansion of red flag laws, the 11% excise tax on firearms ammunition, liability expansion for manufacturers, and storage and vehicle visibility penalties. This isn't a reform. This is a comprehensive shift in their stance on the Second Amendment. People may have had their problems with Glenn Youngkin. I certainly did. But he kept a lot of this Second Amendment nonsense infringement at bay. And Abigail Spanberger, who ran as a moderate, said that she was not going to do anything to not do anything. She was going to respect the Second Amendment. Well, these bills show that she has absolutely no respect for the Second Amendment. None. She claimed she carried a gun when she worked for the CIA. And that means nothing when you're pushing this madness through. AR platform rifles are, as I said, one among the most commonly used owned firearms in the United States. And as I mentioned before, under Heller, common lawful use is protected. So the constitutional issue at hand is, if millions of Americans own them lawfully, what possible historical analog could there be to allow for this? So this is going to get litigated, and probably I'm not sure what circuit Virginia falls under. It could conceivably get struck down because Bruin is very clear, very clear. But there's a ban, as I said, on, or there could be a ban on 18 to 20-year-olds buying firearms. 18 to 20-year-olds can vote. They can join the military. They are legal adults. And there is no historic evidence to suggest that there were founding era bans on adults having, young or not, having access to firearms. And I predict, it's been struck down in other places. I predict it'll get struck down here as well, but that's not going to stop them. I mean, she just took office. She's got at least 4 years to try and end around on this, at least. Now, the 11% excise tax, that is something that probably will end up standing. I would be surprised if the Supreme Court even took it up if it reaches that level. But when the government places a targeted financial burden on the exercise of a constitutional right, the court is going to have to decide whether or not that burden is a neutral revenue policy, or if it functions to chill that right. And I think we all know that its sole function is to chill that right. I don't think you have to be a lawyer or a judge to figure that out. Is it revenue generation or is it deterrence? I think we know the answer to that. And so that is going to be a serious constitutional question that I'm not confident that it will get struck down. I'm really not. Yes, Rockers, you're right. You are absolutely right. She is a communist. They all are. Let's just be real and honest about it. They're all communists. Another big one that Virginia is trying to pass is to expand liability for gun manufacturers and dealers. The problem is there is already a law, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. I've talked about this before, I've written about it before, and it shields lawful sellers from liability of criminal use by third parties. It's the fact that it even is even a possibility is ridiculous to me, because unless there's a defect, you don't sue car manufacturers when somebody gets behind the wheel and kills somebody. Now, I know somebody this happened to, and they did sue the car manufacturer, but there was a documented defect that caused the accident. And if there's a documented defect, fine. But that's not what this is about. This is just more of their attempts to infringe on your Second Amendment right. Because they don't want you to have that level of independence. They want to control you. And they can't control you to the extent that they want to if you have the means to protect yourself. So the assault weapons bans, the magazine bans, the federal liability protections, the sensitive place bans that I didn't really get into, but the laws, the bills as they're written will basically ban carrying pretty much everywhere, because it defines every place as a sensitive area, sidewalks, parks, you name it. Now there are some the red flag laws that they're trying to expand. Those could pass. Those could they're going to pass in Virginia. Those could hold up in court. Excise tax could possibly hold up in court. Under 21 bans, yeah, I think that might get struck down. But what is going to survive, in my opinion, the storage requirements, the training requirements, and some of the dealer compliance standards, which again, even some of them will put some of these people out of business, which again, it's what they want. This is constitutional chess. The states pass the law. The courts decide whether it stands. It's not whether or not they think these laws are a good idea, whether they think they're wise. The issue is whether they align with the meaning of the Second Amendment. And post-Bruin, history is going to be the test. And Virginia and New Mexico, they're about to get into that exam. They're about to get into that exam. So we'll see whether or not they pass or fail. If they fail, we all are going to deal with that failing grade. All right, we got a little under a half an hour left, and I want to get into this. I've had this on my radar for a couple of weeks now, and I just haven't had a chance to get to it, but now I do. And we have, as a society, for nearly a century, IQ scores have, and not just the United States, but in Western society, IQ scores have steadily risen in developed nations. And then something happened in the mid-2000s where that climb stalled, and in some cases reversed itself. And what could have happened in the mid-2000s, you ask? Well, it is the smartphone era. At the same time that the IQ levels leveled off and started to decline, academic performance declined, attention spans decreased, screen time exploded. That's not speculation. That's what happened. For 80 years, almost a century, that line was on an upward trajectory. And then we put childhood in the pocket and handed it an algorithm. And that algorithm has been raising our children for a long time now. Researchers have a documented thing that's called the reverse Flynn effect. And it's a slowdown or decline in IQ gains across multiple Western countries. And they found measurable declines in several cognitive domains between 2006 and 2018. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, sometimes called the Nation's Report Card, reports that reading and math scores are down. International PISA scores are down. And that's a problem. That doesn't necessarily mean that this generation is genetically less intelligent, but something shifted. Something shifted. I mean, genes don't collapse on themselves in 15 years, but environments do. Now, I mentioned Gen Z because they're not the latest generation, but they grew up entirely in an algorithm in front of screens, and it wasn't accidental. Doom scrolling, push notifications, algorithm personalization, autoplay, which we've seen get people into trouble recently. These features were designed to remove stopping cues. They were designed to keep people engaged. And in the model that we're seeing in the social media environment, engagement means time. And when attention is the currency, then time and you are the products. Now this week, Mark Zuckerberg he testified in a trial in Los Angeles. And he testified that Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, doesn't target children under 13. And that Instagram was not designed to maximize screen time as one of its goals. And he also testified that age verification is difficult because users self-report their birthdays. I know that there's this new thing on Instagram, I guess it's close to a year now, where they've had this thing where teenagers couldn't sign up or whatever. I think that's a load of crap, to be honest. But those are his claims. But under 13 use has been widely reported for years. Engagement metrics drive revenue. And anyone who does anything online with the goal of trying to monetize knows that engagement metrics drive revenue. It's just a fact. And the architecture of design, the design makes it harder to leave than to stay. So I have a hard time believing that time on app was not the goal. I have a hard time believing that. And I think anyone paying attention, I think anyone who didn't grow up in the smartphone era and who remembers what it was like before that, I think anyone in that camp, Gen Z and below or above, I think all of us understand that. Because if maximizing the time wasn't the goal, they accidentally built the most effective attention trap in history. In history. Children are always going to do what they're not supposed to do. It's part of being a kid. And these social media platforms, particularly Meta, since we're talking about Zuckerberg and his testimony, rely on self-reported age. And if a child types in a year that makes him older than he actually is, the system just accepts it. And if internal estimates showed that millions under the age of 13 were users, and enforcement depends on them being honest when they sign up, that's not meaningful enforcement of any kind. It's silly to think otherwise. If your child's safety depends on the honesty of children, that's not enforcement, that's just wishful thinking. Now, I know people are going to say, despite the fact that this all happened at the same time, despite the fact that you can point to a specific period of time and all of these things happened, correlation is not causation. Fine. When IQ trends flatten and decline, when academic performance drops, attention spans decrease, screen time skyrockets. And this, like I said, this happens all around the same time. it would be the height of irresponsibility not to at least question it. It wouldn't, if you don't investigate that, then I don't know what to tell you. It would be silly not to at least look into it. Because if you take your car to a mechanic because the check engine light was on, and the mechanic says, it's not my engine, you don't just drive away. I mean, you go somewhere else, you get it investigated, you get it looked at. If you don't know how to investigate it yourself, which obviously we don't. Gen Z did not, and generations younger than that, did not design this algorithm. They didn't invent the doom scroll. Adults did, executives did. And some of those adults and executives who were responsible for this don't allow their own children on these platforms. That should tell you something. And now we're watching a generation grow up inside an optimized system for attention capture. So I suppose it's responsible of me to say that the connection may not be causal. I think it is, but okay. Let's say that that's true. The convergence of all of these factors is too strong, it's too prevalent to ignore. You can't ignore it. When the numbers move and the very architects of the platform say, it's not us, the skepticism is not cynicism. It's being a responsible adult. And the adults need to take a look at what's happening to these younger generations and do what they can to fix it. Stop letting screens babysit your kids. Maybe that's a start. Was that too harsh? Oh, well. Anyway, we got about 15 minutes left, and I want to get to this as well. And I may not be able to get to all of it, but we're going to get started. And if I have to continue it next time, we will. Something that we talk about often here is the Islamization of this country. And I may not be able to get to, I'm not going to get to some of it, but I'm going to try and get it in. Amy Meck, if you're not familiar with Amy Meck, she has been doing some fantastic work in highlighting just how much they are trying to Islamize this country. And let's take a look here, because this is something that's going on right now in Lubbock, Texas. Texas is pretty much ground zero for Islamization at this point. And a guy who was on, he was a member of this Islamic group at Texas Tech University. has purchased a school, a defunct school in Lubbock. Let's take a look at this.
I just bought this elementary school, and that's kind of crazy. My name is Muhammad Tabba. Now, you might be asking why. It's because I have one goal. I need to turn this place, yes, this place, into a masjid before Ramadan gets here. And I don't know about you, but that's in 45 days. Here's the keys. Let's go check it out. So this is the school, kind of big, kind of creepy. And this is the chapel. It's pretty big, and I love the light. A bunch of classrooms, state of the art, as you can see. This is the gym. This is where we're gonna be playing basketball, volleyball, pickleball, whatever you want. Last but not least, the amount of land we have. Just imagine what we could put on here. Soccer fields, pickleball courts, volleyball nets.
Tonight on Rare TV, we're exposing the next stop in the Islamization of Texas. Lubbock is now the latest target in the Islamic takeover, and it's happening faster than you can say Sharia. Just this weekend, on February 15th, the so-called Unity Center opened its doors in a former elementary school in Northeast Lubbock.
A mission started by students here in Lubbock now has a reach beyond borders. It's the opening weekend for the new Unity Center, which will take over the old Arnett Elementary School in Northeast Lubbock. The Unity Center is an Islamic mosque and community center, but it's open to everyone, no matter your religion. It'll boast sports fields and equipment and other fun things to draw people in and offer space to build community.
Anyway, that goes on for a while. And it's another step. I mean, when you look at what's going on in Texas right now, you have mosques opening up. I can't remember what the rate is, but it's exponential, the number of mosques that are opening up every month. This is, they're trying to introduce Sharia into this country and make it, they're trying to, they have said numerous times that they want Islam in every home. And not just one person. I mean, multiple so-called imams have said this. And the pushback is always, well, Islam is fine and people are free to practice their religion, but Sharia is not. And even Donald Trump has said something along these lines. There's a problem with that. Islam is the name of the religion. Sharia is how it is upheld. The two are inseparable. You can't have Islam without Sharia. It doesn't work that way. To be a Muslim is by definition someone who adheres to Sharia. Islam itself means submission, and a Muslim is someone who has submitted or surrendered. And of course, they have submitted to the will of their God, Allah. This is, as I said, the two are inseparable. You can't say, well, only a small percentage of Muslims participate in jihad and are Islamists. But again, it doesn't work that way. The Muslims that you claim are your neighbors and aren't violent, they're either hiding it very well or they're cultural Muslims. They were raised Muslims, but they don't really practice, they don't really believe it. But when push comes to shove, whose side do you think they're going to land on if it comes down to a confrontation? Do you really think if they were raised Muslim and so-called practice, if it came down to it, they wouldn't chop your head off? If you believe that, you are naive. This Unity Center and all of the other things that's going on with respect to Islam, it's not controversial just because they're buildings. It's not controversial just because they're mosques. It's controversial because it represents something called institutional permanence. It represents an organizational structure that is designed to expand and take over. Islam didn't take over Christian nations in the Middle East because they asked nicely. Islam was founded in blood. They conquered everyone, as they are commanded to do by their prophet, Muhammad. And to think that, what's the famous saying? When somebody tells you who they are, believe them. When someone tells you that they're here to make you submit, believe them. Look at what's going on in the UK. Islam has basically taken over the UK. Because people are afraid to be labeled Islamophobic. People take this freedom, the freedom of religion, to the point where it becomes, again, suicidal empathy. They hate us and they want to take over. They have said they are going to outbreed us. They are going to take over. At least that's their goal. Why people don't believe that is mystifying to me. Sharia, as I've said many times, is completely incompatible and antithetical with Western civilization. Completely. And we're getting close to the time here, and so I'm gonna end that particular segment there, because I really wanted to get to this, which is along the same lines. I wanted to get to this because there was where did it go? There was someone in Zohran Mamdani's administration who basically said they want to outlaw dogs, not have them as pets because they're haram. I'm paraphrasing the tweet. And Randy Fine, who I'm not the hugest fan of, he's not he's okay, I guess, but he's had some questionable votes and things like that. But he was spot on when he said in a quote tweet of that, if they make us choose between dogs and Muslims, the choice is easy. And it is. It absolutely is. But here is his an interview he did with Laura Loomer. And I know what you're going to say about Laura Loomer. I get it. But I want you to hear what he has to say.
But what people need to understand is it's okay for them not to like dogs. It's not okay for them to tell us that we can't have them. As you pointed out, I'm Jewish, you're Jewish. There are certain things that many Jews do. They don't eat pork, for example. But I'm not aware of Jews that are saying no one can buy pork at the grocery store because we don't eat it. You're allowed to practice your own religion, but you're not allowed to force your views on others.
And that's the rub. That's the rub, because that is their goal. Their entire goal is to force their religion on us. All right. There's one other thing I wanted to play for you that was that pretty much made my day when I saw it, and that was Grandma. And I posted this on X, and this was one of the best things that I saw online yesterday. Check this out.
So nice. I like her. Please.
I like him too. One thing I like about him, he keeps it real, just like Grandma. I appreciate that because I can trust him, because he tells exactly how he feels and what he thinks. Thank God for this president. I am filled, my cup runneth over, because he allowed his constituents, his people, to come to my house to interview me, to talk about the murder of my grandson. It seemed like nobody cared. I'm an advocate for murder. I marched, I rallied, I pulled out other families in the District of Columbia that had murders and did not have answers.
Tension. Oh, wow, it looks like the stream crashed. Are we back? I don't know how much you all missed, unfortunately. But anyway, all right, y'all. I guess that's going to do it. I hope you caught most of that. If not, check out my X feed. It's up there. We are not just here to fill the airtime. We're here to equip Christians to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ and carry the banner of faith, freedom, and hope into the next generation. And if any of what I said matters to you, please don't just watch. Share this episode, share the channel, bring another man into the fight. And if you want to wear what you stand for, head over to missionreadymen.com, click Shop 7 Armors, and check out all of the great designs we have there about bold faith, true grit, and unapologetic patriotism. And also, if you head over to missionreadymen.com, you will see the SHR shop, where you can check out all of the designs we have there for the different shows that we have, the logo tees, the 250 reasons to read source documents tee in honor of the 250th anniversary of the birth of this country. So check that out as well. And remember, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, but the Lord is right there with you. So keep your prayers going up and your head on a swivel. God bless.